What's that?
Hey, watch where you point that thing, Sam the Strong.
Sorry, Hetheria. I thought it might be that troll again.
Hang on. Kyle!
I thought you said we were here to talk about how to help our students prepare and review for testing.
Oh, we are, but there's time for a quick game. It's like you always say, you can take a little bit of time for fun, and it's great for your mental well-being.
What about the troll?
Samuel, there is not a troll. Rachel, your character thinks that the group has got to be close to the wizard's treasure.
We've got to be close to the wizard's treasure.
Well, let's try this way then.
I knew it. This is the magic door. The king told us about it.
You're right. We just have to say the magic words he taught us to open him. I can't believe I forgot the magic words. I thought I wrote them down in my notes.
Don't worry, Sam, it's only a game. Why don't you roll another die for a memory check? Oh, your character remembers the magic words. Thank you, and I hope you'll join us for the Q&A.
Yeah!
Good job, guys. I knew you could do it. You know, it's easy to forget things in a stressful situation. It would be nice if we could roll memory checks in real life. But of course, it's not that simple. When I was teaching, reviewing and preparing students for high-stakes testing was so important. Taking that extra step to get my class ready for the test made all the difference in the world.
That's so true. And since we're on the topic, how about we jump into LYC?
Yeah, let's do it. You find yourself in a room with blue lights and curtains. A man in a suit is welcoming you to the show. Welcome to Launch Your Classroom. I'm Kyle Pope. The end of the school year is within sight. You've been working hard over the past 10 months to teach your students the curriculum. And I bet you spent several late nights grading papers, many extra hours in the class preparing materials for the next day, and a countless amount of time lesson planning. Now there's one final obstacle to overcome: the end of the year test. Test time can be a stressful one for you and students alike. It's perfectly natural to feel a little pressure. In fact, it can help you focus. However, too much stress can have the opposite effect. And people who feel like they'll perform inadequately on a test are way more likely to show higher levels of anxiety than their confident peers. So how do we, as teachers, instill this confidence in our students? We make sure they're prepared. Here's the good news. You've done a lot of the groundwork already throughout the school year by teaching the curriculum. Now it's time to complete their preparation. In today's episode, we're going to talk about some valuable test-taking tips and strategies to make sure that your students are ready and confident. Let's begin with a fun review game to help engage them in the process.
All right, here's a review game that's great for those times when students need to memorize specific facts for a test. Things like multiplication tables, important events, dates, foreign language vocabulary words. Those are great for this game. Now, it'll work for students of all ages, but it's especially great for the end of grade tests found in elementary school. It's called I Have, Who Has. The game is based around a deck of cards that you can create. Each card is split into two parts. The top half of every card says I have, and one of the important terms from your material. The bottom half has who has and a question, a problem, or phrase related to a different term. The object is to match terms to questions. You'll want each student to have about 5 to 10 cards in their hands, so in a small group of 4 students, that's around 40 cards in total. And the deck of dates, events that you're going to see here are to help me cover my social studies material. Okay, Rachel, start us off.
Let's see who has the Battle of Hastings.
Aha, I have 1066.
Now that Sam has discovered a match, he puts the card with I have 1066 in the center of the table. The first student to discard their entire hand wins. All right, the student who made the match continues the game, this time asking their Who has?
Okay, who has the French Revolution?
I know this. I have 1789.
Nice job, guys. So you can see how this game would be easily adaptable to any subject where memorization is key. From math,
Who has 42?
I have 7 times 6.
to science,
Who has evaporation, condensation, precipitation?
Got it. I have the water cycle.
Great job, guys. The best part about I Have, Who Has is that students are holding and interacting with the most important pieces of your curriculum. Each turn, the game encourages them to read and reread the cards, increasing their familiarity with the material, allowing them to quickly recall facts. Once they get the hang of it, consider having your students compete against their best times for even more engagement. Ultimately, repeated exposure will help make sure your students are ready for test day.
Standardized high-stakes testing is a big part of the American education system. Educators who visit the U.S. often comment on just how much we test here and how important to the overall educational experience it is. But why? Why is so much emphasis put on end-of-grade and end-of-course testing? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Let's take a look at some of them now. The first and most obvious reason we test students is to measure their learning. End-of-the-year tests are summative. They are your students' final opportunity to demonstrate what they have learned through your time together. Every activity, quiz, and unit test you've given them are steps of a journey that reaches its completion at the final test. Students who succeed at end-of-year testing have proven beyond doubt that they have met the learning goals established for the year by the U.S. Department of Education, your school district, administrators, and you. Second, we test students for the purposes of objectivity. Every educator teaches their material in different ways, some more effective, others less so. How do we, as teachers, ensure that regardless of teaching style and method, students come away with a firm grasp of the material? That is where standardized testing comes in, providing an outside, objective benchmark that shows whether or not a student has demonstrated a level of proficiency with the subject equal to the standard established by the state. And finally, standards-based end-of-the-year assessments provide quantitative data by which educators can examine their own effectiveness. Students move on to new classrooms and study new things, but we teachers often get a chance to teach the tested material again. So we need to know when our methods are working. Were your language arts scores slightly higher this year? What did you do differently, and how can you refine and repeat the process next year? Were your math scores just a bit lower than your colleagues' scores? Talk to your fellow teachers and learn from their successes, and find a way to apply them to your own teaching. The intense focus on standardized testing in the U.S. can feel overwhelming sometimes. But it's important to remember the productive reasons that we do it. Now that you know why we test, you can begin to ask yourself how to make it meaningful for students and for yourself.
We are very happy to have Ryan Hisi back in the studio with us today to talk a little bit about testing. Ryan, we're happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
All right, great. So we're talking about testing today. Did you have any particular testing rituals or routines that you did with your kids before the test?
Oh, I had lots. Every morning that we were taking that test, I would bring in a kind of a platter with some fresh fruit. I always went with grapes, apples, pineapple, and then I'd also have some cheese cubes. And so, you know, there's a lot of research and science about sugars and proteins. Of course, you know, your fruits with those natural sugars and your cheese having that protein, and it helps your brain to think better, and hopefully that translates to better performance. The best part of that was I always brought a little bowl of peppermints, because there's also some research about peppermint itself and also sugar kind of energizing you and helping students to do a little better. So hey, if it works, I'll give it a shot. And the kids enjoyed it.
Yeah, give them something fun to look
Yeah,
forward to.
right.
Yeah, that's great. So we talk about differentiation throughout the year and how teachers need to be aware of different student needs and abilities and differentiate their instruction and their activities, to make sure they're getting what the student needs. Is that something that we still need to do when it comes to test review time?
Oh, more so than ever. More so than ever. I think, by the end of the year, when you're getting ready to have those tests, you have spent a lot of time getting to know your students. You have mounds and mounds of data and information throughout the year that you've collected. And so I've got this group of students and I'm very concerned that they're not going to test at a proficient level. So you think about, well, what do they need to know to get there? Probably things like basic terms, review of some base level skills, you're keeping your vocabulary just what they need. And then you've got other students who, you could never teach them anything at all for the next week and they're still going to test proficient. But that's not enough for those students because the tests that I administered went to advanced and superior even. So how do you continue to push their achievement? And that's where you differentiate your review for them. You go to higher tier vocabulary. You build on basic skills, build their speed, right? So that they can do more test items. So differentiation is key.
You want everybody growing. You don't want to leave stagnant or just say, just because you can pass the test, we're leaving it
Exactly.
at that.
No good enough when it comes to those tests.
Well, great. Thanks again for coming and sharing this knowledge with us today.
You're very welcome.
This review game is called Erase the Competition. You begin by breaking your class into several groups of approximately 4 students. Then you task the groups with drawing an object with a certain number of lines or parts. It's best to theme this to your class or curriculum. For example, when I was teaching world history, I would have each group draw a castle with 7 lines. If you're a science teacher, you could use molecules with 6 parts, in math, equations with 5 components, and so on. Whichever number you choose, make sure that you have enough review questions for the class total. So if you had 5 groups and 7 lines, you need to make sure that you had 35 questions prepared. Now, have a representative from each group come up to the whiteboard and draw their object. Also have them write their group number above the object to help you keep track. Choose a group to go first, then give them a review question. Allow the class a short time to confer with their groups, then ask the first group to share their answer to the class. If they're correct, then they get to choose to erase 1 line of any of their opponent's drawings from the whiteboard. If they're incorrect, the question goes to the next team who must be prepared to share their answer immediately. If that team answers correctly, then they get to choose which line to erase. After the line is erased, the next team gets a new question and a set amount of time to discuss it. If a team gets fully erased, then they cannot win the competition. However, they can still participate by answering questions and erasing other teams. The last team with a line left wins the competition. You know you need to review, but what should you focus on? Here are 3 tips to help you determine just that. Number 1, find out what your students remember. Write up a pre-review quiz with a variety of questions that cover the primary concepts from your curriculum. This should be an ungraded assignment, but you'll get a lot of great data from it. If the students remember one concept really well, then you don't need to spend a lot of time on it during your review session. As for that question that everyone missed, you'll definitely want to cover that again. Number 2, open up your gradebook. Look over your students' scores for the whole year for certain trends. Were there units of study where a majority of students did well? What about units that they seemed to struggle with? If they didn't get a good grasp of the concepts the first time, it's logical to assume that they may still need some help with them. Number 3, standards and weighting. Many tests will give you a breakdown on not only which standards they cover, but also an estimate of how many questions will be related to that standard. If you know that there'll be a lot more questions about Standard 7 than Standard 3, then you should allocate your review time to a similar ratio. Spend most of the time on the topics that are most likely to be covered. If your state doesn't provide this information, you can often get a good idea about the frequency of specific standards in previous tests. Those tests are a valuable resource, even beyond review planning. So let's take a look at how we can use them to prepare our students in some additional ways. Were you more nervous the first time you set foot in the classroom or the last time you taught? The first, right? It's partly because you didn't know exactly what to expect. And now you've had experience handling different types of students and talking in front of large groups. The mystery's been taken away and you're more comfortable. This is the same with almost any new experience, including testing. Although we can't continuously give our students state standardized tests throughout the year, we can take some of the mystery away. To begin this process, we need to enlighten our students by providing access to the testing format. Most states make past tests or questions available online for free. A quick internet search of your test will yield results that you can download and print off. Take several of these questions, preferably easy ones, and give them to your students. Talk to them about format. Is it multiple choice, constructed response, or a bit of both? Walk through a couple of the problems with the students so they can see your thought process in finding a solution. Next, you'll need to elevate the level of rigor. All test questions are not created equal. Some are more difficult than others. If you only prepare your students with the easiest of questions, they're going to get an unpleasant surprise on test day. So give the students some more difficult test questions and allow them a little time to practice. Be sure to go over the questions and allow students time to explain out loud why they chose a certain answer or why they decided to write a particular response. Make any corrections necessary. The final step in test practice is a simulated exercise. Select a variety of questions from previous tests, then create a packet for each student. Next, set up a similar situation as what they'll be facing on the day of test. For example, make it time-bound, give them bubble sheets, hand out pencils and scrap sheets of paper. And once the simulation is over and you have reviewed the answers as a class, take some time and talk to the class about how they felt or what questions they may have about the actual test day. Having been enlightened about the test, elevated to increasingly rigorous questions, and having completed a simulated exercise, your students will be more comfortable with the test questions and format. So when they do sit down to take the real thing, they'll be experienced test takers.
We all know that, even under the best circumstances, the classroom can be a stressful place. For the teacher, there are lesson plans to write, behavior to manage, and a room full of young people's minds to shape and guide. Students can be stressed by their desire to achieve, their fear of failure, or any number of stressors they bring from home. During high-stakes testing, these stresses can be amplified and multiplied. So here are some tips to keep the stress levels low in your classroom during testing. Transparent scheduling. In the weeks leading up to the testing period, keep an up-to-date, highly visible schedule of events posted in your room. Make sure the testing days are clearly marked, along with review sessions, practice tests, and any post-testing celebrations. Having a transparent schedule will keep students informed and avoid any nasty surprises on test day. Teach deep breathing. Taking some deep breaths is one of the best ways to manage stress. Breathing slowly in and out for a minute or two has been proven to lower your heart rate, blood pressure, and feelings of anxiety. Coach your students beforehand on how and why to practice intentional deep breathing, and encourage them to do it during testing if they feel stressed or overwhelmed. And remember to take a few deep breaths yourself from time to time. Celebrate success. Do you have a classroom reward system? As a testing period approaches, consider increasing the rate that students earn rewards. Keep students in a positive frame of mind and motivated by emphasizing the rewards for success. Does raising your hand before speaking normally earn a student 1 entry into your lottery jar? Double the reward and let them have 2 chances to win. Does putting away manipulatives in an orderly fashion earn the class a few beans in the bean jar? Give them a handful. Remember, testing time is a stressful period for teachers as well. Take care of yourself, find a few minutes each day to decompress, and stay connected with your colleagues. They're going through the same thing you are, and together you can help your students achieve success with as little stress as possible.
Take a second and picture the following. It's test day. Your desks are neatly arranged, test booklets are stacked up in the front along with pencils and scrap paper. The students walk in and begin to take their seats. You glance up at the clock as the beginning time for the test nears. How do you feel? How do your students feel? I feel a little pressured just talking about it. But like we discussed today, test time doesn't have to be one of fear and extreme stress. The trick is making sure that your students are well prepared. So we encourage you to take our tips and strategies and create a plan for the weeks leading up to your test day, throw some fun review games in there, and give your students the confidence that they need to succeed. Here at EPI and Launch Your Classroom, we would also like to let you know that this is our last live broadcast for the current school year. We've appreciated your viewership, the questions that you've asked, and our shared vision to grow as educators. But we're not done with professional development yet. We'll see you again in the 2019-2020 school year with all new content. Thank you so much, and I hope you'll join us for the Q&A and beyond.
All right. Thanks for watching and for the great questions we've been getting in the chat, on our social media channels, and emails. We're going to try to answer as many of these as we can today. Remember, though, it's not too late to submit a question for our Q&A. If you have any questions about how to prepare students for high-stakes testing, put them in the chat and we'll answer them live. Joining us today for the Q&A is, as always, the host of Launch Your Classroom Live, Kyle Pope. Kyle, what about that troll?
Johnny, there is no troll.
And also joining us today is the director of EPI's Department of Program Services, Mr. Ryan Hennessy. Ryan, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Johnny.
All right, let's take a look at our first question. This comes in from Annalyn. We have 3 weeks before our final exams. Is there something I can start doing this early? Kyle?
Yeah, Annalyn, absolutely. So I like to review throughout the entire year. If you haven't been doing that, that's okay. It's something to consider for the future. But yes, you can totally start reviewing some of the games that we showed you today. Would be great to use. Also, it's a good time to start prepping your kids on what that test is going to look like. If it's going to be on the computer, your area probably has a sample exam that you can show them and walk them through on the computer so they know what it looks like. So just starting these simple familiarization and review games would be great and entirely appropriate to do right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. We've got another one here. This is from Desmond. My pacing was slower than expected, so do I focus more on getting through the curriculum or reviewing with the little time remaining? Ryan, any experience with this?
Unfortunately, Johnny, yes, I do have some experience. Desmond, this will happen. Okay, so here are a couple of ideas for you to help out. Number one, I would say you need to check your curriculum and all of its supporting documents. Oftentimes it will tell you what would be considered the major work of the course or the grade. And when you have certain standards, groups of standards that are considered major work, you can expect to see more test items on those things. So if the content that you have left, now let me be clear, you need to teach all of the content, but if it is not major work, I'd say it's okay to go ahead and start doing a little review, maybe 30 minutes or so every day, and gradually increase that time while you're working through the content and the other time. But if the content that you have still to teach ahead of you is major work, you need to focus on teaching all of that content. Desmond, good luck. I know you're going to get there.
All right, thank you, Ryan. Next, we had a question from Sonia. How often should I do practice testing before the test? I don't want to accidentally burn my students out. Kyle?
Hey, Sonia. Yeah, thank you, and I like where your head's at. You don't want to get your students too frustrated or going over the material too much or testing too much to get them all frazzled before the actual test. So with practice testing, it's something that you build up to. You may just show them one example on the first day and then go over it out loud and demonstrate your thought process in answering that question. And then the next time that you come back to it, you may just give your students one question and allow them to work through it on their own and then talk it over as a class. And then the next time maybe you give them 2 or 3 more questions and let them work through it in the same process. So it's just something that you build up on. It's not something that you need to start, right this second and do it every single day. If you start now, you can certainly space this out more. And then, honestly, I wouldn't give them a practice test or even maybe test questions probably the day before. I would just try to make it relaxing as possible, maybe hit a couple high notes, just so they have that kind of barrier and cool down time before the actual test day. Thank you so much for your question.
Okay, I've got an interesting question here from John, Ryan. After the test is completed, what should I do for the rest of the day with my 3rd graders?
Hey, John, the answer really depends. If you are testing in a school where there are multiple grades, for example, maybe there are 2 or 3 other 3rd grade classes or 4th, 5th, whatever it may be, in my experience, until all of the grades, either on your hall and in some cases in the whole building, are finished with a high stakes test, you really can't do much at all. So you've got to keep them quiet. I would suggest that you have some preferred books. Maybe if you have students that typically, they want to read magazines or comic books, things that they don't get to read because of, maybe leveling or something, let them read it. Then when the school finishes, keep it light. When the principal or head teacher gives you the all clear, keep it light. They've had a big day. So maybe some read alouds, familiar math games, things that you've done like that.
Okay. Kyle, we've got a fan of your Erase the Competition game here. Benilda says, I'd like to use Erase the Competition, but what if my students get angry at each other?
Yeah, thank you, Belinda. Yeah, this can be an issue, especially when you do have that type of competition where you're letting certain teams go up and technically take other teams out of the game. So what you need to do is set this up the right way. Say, hey, yeah, this is a competition, but obviously if you're knocked out, you can still participate and try to get back at that other team. You also need to make sure that you're setting up the proper procedures, like only one student come to the board to erase it. Keep it as procedural based, as straightforward and easy as you can. And if students start getting heated up, then take a second, talk to them. Whenever I did review games too, I rewarded the entire class. Yeah, the winning team might get a little bit better reward, but everybody was going to get something at the end just because I felt like review was one of those really important things that you want everybody involved in and participating in. So thank you for your question.
Okay, it looks like this is going to be our last question today. Flora asks, I've heard of other teachers changing their regular seating on test day. Is this something I should do too? Ryan?
Hey, Flora. It really depends on your current room setup. If you have group or desk clusters, things like that, you'll likely have to do it. You have to have students arranged in such a way where the test and the environment is able, ready for you to control very easily. So you may have to go a little more traditional, separate desks and things like that. However, I would make one change. I would not change the regular seating on test day. In my experience in elementary school, go ahead and change it a week, even a week and a half or 2 out before test day. Because what you don't want is your students to come into the classroom and look around that classroom and it just be vastly different than anything they've ever seen. What you're going to do is give them a little shock, a little surprise. The nerves may come because it obviously is so different than every other day. So go ahead and kind of warm them up to the idea of the change before the test. Thanks, Flora. Good luck.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. Okay, everyone. That's all the questions we have time for today. This has been our final episode for the 2018-2019 school year. But Launch Your Classroom will return on August 16th, 2019 for a brand new series of episodes, packed with strategies, tips, and a whole lot more. In the meantime, if you're looking for some great summer reading, make sure you use the link in the description below to head over to Amazon.com and pick up our Launch Your Classroom ebook series. And remember, to stay up to date on all the free professional development that EPI offers, why not subscribe to our YouTube channel? And while you're at it, click the bell icon to receive notifications when we're live. From everyone here at Launch Your Classroom, we can't wait to join you again for another school year of professional development. Take care, everyone. We'll see you next time.